Coal, a critical component of this country's energy grid. Welcome to Buckingham Coal in Perry County, mine number 6. And for thousands of Ohio homes, coal is where your power starts.
I'm a laid-off coal miner, and one of the big reasons I came here today is I don't want those 50 or 100 guys working in there today to end up like me.
Ask members of state legislatures or members of Congress from either party. The last 8 years have brought severe regulations on the coal industry, hurting miners and their families.
Well, there certainly has, for the past 8 years, been a war on coal.
But coal is no longer a dirty word. Even with emerging technology, coal remains the bedrock of power generation for this generation.
From Ohio's standpoint, and really not just from Ohio, but from nationally, whatever portfolio of energy that we put together, coal has to be at the centerpiece of that, has to be at the focal point.
Technology follows the miners miles into the mine. The underground network of tunnels is covered by Wi-Fi. Now, GPS pinpoints exactly where every miner, including the senators touring the mine, are in real time.
Impressive. You know, sum it all up with impressive. I mean, it's quite obvious that these individuals are professional at what they do. Safety is paramount.
Power companies installed hundreds of millions of dollars of clean air technology in their coal-fired plants, reducing emissions while powering the grid, all while being the lowest cost of power to Ohioans.
Every ton of coal that's shipped out of this Buckingham mine is used in Ohio. It goes right to the Conesville power plant.
As lawmakers debate the state's 21st century energy plan that looks at utilizing all resources, coal remains the vital link on the energy grid.
The fact is that a smart energy policy for a state like Ohio or any state is one that relies on a variety of sources, including renewables. But coal is certainly the way that we power our state and our industries, and so we rely on mines like this to keep the lights on.
So I want people to know that it's not an either-or scenario. You know, we can have a clean environment, and we can be productive. We can do both.
Human trafficking, it sounds evil and underground, but it's spreading through Ohio communities in broad daylight. And for the young women and girls caught up in this criminal web, often they feel there's only two ways out. One, either their trafficker dies or they do.
To this person that I knew was going to kill me if I didn't do what he told me to do.
Vanessa Perkins is a survivor. Sexually abused as a young girl, her world devolved into drugs, making her a perfect target for human traffickers.
And then I met my trafficker because he was going to get me dope, and that's how he actually groomed me.
When their freedom is kidnapped by the traffickers, young women become slaves. They steal, sell drugs, sell themselves. This becomes the only reality they know.
He made lots of money off of me. He literally would strip my clothes off of me, physically rip them off me in the middle of the street, in the middle of the daytime, and search me for money. And this was the fearful tactics that traffickers use to keep us in line, so to speak.
Senator Stephanie Kunze sponsored Senate Bill 4, giving judges the ability to offer survivors the opportunity to have their criminal convictions linked to trafficking expunged.
And to really have an opportunity to access a job or good housing, having that on their record, that criminal record in their background, is prohibiting some of those. It's another barrier for someone who's already been victimized.
The criminal justice system in Ohio needs to treat victims like they're victims instead of treating them like they're criminals and victimizing them again by preventing them from rebuilding their lives.
The bill adds more discretion for judges hearing these cases. Franklin County Municipal Judge Paul Herbert believes it's an important step for survivors and the court system compared to what the law allows today.
But the simplest case would be, let's say you have a prostitution with a drug charge, because they're all drug addicts and they get caught with some needles, so they've got some paraphernalia. It doesn't make sense for me if you've got the same act that's happening, you've got a prostitution and a needle. You can get the prostitution expunged, but you can't get the needle expunged. See, I don't understand that.
Judge Herbert runs a catch court. That stands for changing actions through changing habits. His court oversees human trafficking cases. Search warrants tell the startling story of how this crime affects every neighborhood.
And the Dublin police are bringing me search warrants, and I'm signing off on them going, this is going on in our hotels right down the street in Dublin, Ohio. So basically any place where there's money to be made off women being sold for sex, you're going to have human trafficking.
Vanessa escaped that world and turned her life around with the help of the court. Now she works as an advocate for survivors caught in the web of human trafficking.
And I gotta tell you though, it's real tricky because quite often they love the people that are hurting them. So if I jump in there and say, that's not okay, they shouldn't be doing that, then they're gonna run from me. I kind of become the enemy. So it's like very cautiously just letting them know what happened to me and hoping that they can connect the dots.
Monday, the Senate releases its new 2-year state budget plan. This year, it came with a steep challenge, finding $1 billion of additional savings through a reduction in spending while protecting Ohio's most vulnerable. Ohio Senate President Larry Obhoff has a message to Ohioans and Ohio taxpayers.
I believe that we've tried to restrain the rate of growth of government, manage things in a fiscally responsible manner, and still been able to invest in the things that Ohioans care about. Well, there are two very different worldviews. One that has higher taxes and more government regulation and more interference in the economy, and one that believes in lower taxes, letting people keep more of their hard-earned money, getting government red tape and regulations out of the way. And we've seen the results of both of those views in Ohio's recent history. We've cut taxes by more than any other state in the country. We've changed the way we do regulations and gotten some red tape and regulations out of the way of small business owners in particular. And we've added 460,000 jobs while taking our rainy day fund from less than $1 to over $2 billion today. I don't think that I've seen anything this year that would suggest that we should reverse those types of policies. They've helped turn Ohio around. We're moving in the right direction, and we're going to continue doing so.
Watch for the official release of the new Senate budget on Monday morning. Protecting Ohio's seniors, job number one right now for State Senator Steve Wilson with Senate Bill 158. And this is really a cause that you have a lot of experience with as a former banker, retired banker, and it's something that you see our elderly Ohioans having to seriously consider and even respond to.
Well, I believe it to be very important for a number of reasons. The first of which, we don't want people preying on our elderly. They're the most vulnerable, they're the most frail of our citizens. We need to protect them in every way we can. The second reason is that when they're defrauded, they change from being private pay for care to being Medicaid for care. And that costs every taxpayer in the state of Ohio. So there's multiple reasons why this is important.
And this fraud is being perpetrated by caretakers, and that can be a family caretaker, it can be an outside caretaker, but it's often something that our seniors don't want to talk about or don't want to admit is happening to them.
Well, that's always a challenge, and it isn't just caretakers, but oftentimes it is. It is people who are preying on our elderly that sit in a room and make calls one right after another to tell them they've won a lottery, they've won a vacation, we'll fix your roof, some way to get to their money. But it is often the case, and you're absolutely right, that once defrauded, the senior is embarrassed or they want to protect the person who has defrauded them, and they don't report.
And this would all be investigated with this bill through the Department of Job and Family Services. And that gives it a little bit extra independent teeth. Instead of having the bank call law enforcement, this can go right to Job and Family Services and have them investigated.
That is correct. Their Division of Adult Protective Services will be where this goes to be investigated, to take the necessary steps to have the fraud halted, to prosecute, to turn over to the prosecutor their investigation for further action. And then once we define who is the defrauder, they're going to have increased penalties. And the full restitution is part of this bill, increased jail time is part of this bill, and finally an additional fine that will go to fund Adult Protective Services.
State Senator Steve Wilson, thank you very much for your time today. Monday, the Senate releases its new 2-year state budget plan. This year, it came with a steep challenge, finding about an additional $1 billion in savings through reductions in spending. But much went into protecting school funding. State Senator Randy Gardner took the lead and has a message for parents.
In a challenging budget, we were still able to make education a real priority. In fact, 534 districts have been protected from any losses in our budget. and many of them will receive increases. And we know that if we do a better job in the state budget, that helps protect local property taxpayers back home. You know, over the last 6 years, many people in Ohio don't realize that we've increased school funding by over $1.4 billion, a 24% increase in per pupil total funding aid to our local school districts. So we've tried to be that important partner in helping educate our children in this state.
The Ohio Senate's version of the budget protects families struggling with the scourge of opiate addiction, all while reducing spending and, of course, balancing the budget without raising taxes.
I think, as we know, across the state of Ohio, we have a crisis.
The Senate added $6 million more to the House's proposal targeting Ohio's war on opiate addiction, investing a total of $176 million.
Children's Services weighed in, and they called many of us and said, we need money.
The Senate responded, recognizing the strain on families struggling with addiction with small children caught in the middle.
More kids are going into foster care, kind of really sad. So we put $60 million into that. A lot of that money also goes to the kinship care, which is, we've talked to grandparents that are now having to raise their grandchildren, and they need help.
The Senate school funding plan invests in growing districts statewide while protecting most districts suffering enrollment losses from losing large amounts of their funding.
In a challenging budget, we were still able to make education a real priority. In fact, 534 districts have been protected from any losses in our budget, and many of them will receive increases. And we know that if we do a better job in the state budget, that helps protect local property taxpayers back home.
The Senate closed a $1 billion budget gap without raising taxes. Instead, it reduced agency overhead costs and reduced the growth of government.
And the Senate is leading by example, as is the House, by cutting 6% out of our own projected budget. What we really tried to do was focus on balancing the budget, being fiscally responsible, while still providing the targeted investments to the issues that matter most to Ohioans, and still providing the services that Ohioans need and deserve.
Which is a fiscally responsible, balanced budget.
Well, the Ohio Constitution requires that we pass a balanced budget every 2 years, and for that reason, and because it's sound fiscal management, our first priority is to make sure that this budget is balanced.
And Ohio's two-year budget plan must be passed and signed into law June 30th.